Happy Friday, folks. Senior editor Mackenzie Taylor here on the Texan's weekly Roundup podcast. This week, the team discusses Governor Abbott's executive order designating fentanyl trafficking organizations as terrorists, El Paso's system for busing non-citizens to sanctuary cities throughout the country, a police reform activist going after his former ally, the mayor of Austin, Attorney General Paxton asking Biden to declare fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction, a district court's ruling that prohibitions on purchasing firearms for those under felony indictment are unconstitutional, the Bexar County Sheriff opening an investigation into Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, the BlackRock CEO touting decarbonization and ESG at a Clinton Global Initiative meeting, Republicans alleging political interference in the Hunter Biden investigation, an update in the case about Texas's prohibition on 18 to 20-year-olds carrying handguns, the historic number of illegal immigrants apprehended so far this fiscal year, the Migrant Resource Center in San Antonio flooding the local area with people who cross the border, and a federal court upholding Texas's law against social media censorship. As always, if you have questions for our team, DM us on Twitter or email us at editor@thetexan.news. We'd love to answer your questions on a future podcast. Thanks for listening and enjoy this episode. Howdy, folks. Mackenzie Taylor here with Brad, Hayden, and Hudson. We've already gone off the rails.
I think you say this every week.
Maybe. We should go back and look.
We can't behave ourselves for 5 minutes in this room.
That's exactly right. I think once all of us are also sitting together, not just like in transient or in transit between offices saying hi, it's like we tend to go off the rails. But we have a lot of stuff to get into today. Rob is off doing things. Daniel's off doing things. Annie's off doing things. So it's the four amigos in the office today. And like I said, we have a lot of news, so we're going to jump right in. Hayden, let's talk about an executive order from Governor Abbott this week. What was the justification for Abbott's order declaring fentanyl traffickers to be terrorists?
Yesterday, Abbott went to Midland and met with some law enforcement officers there, including people from sheriff's departments in the area, and Texas Department of Public Safety Director Colonel Steve McCraw was also there as he signed an executive order declaring Mexican criminal cartels that traffic fentanyl in the state of Texas to be terrorist organizations, and the members of cartels and gangs that traffic fentanyl to be terrorists. Fentanyl is an increasing problem in the state of Texas. According to the executive order, 1,600 Texans died from fentanyl overdoses in 2021, which was a 680% increase from 2018. The death toll is expected to be higher in 2022, and just 2 milligrams of fentanyl, according to the Drug Enforcement Administration, is enough to cause a fatal overdose. During Operation Lone Star, Texas State Police have seized enough fentanyl to cause 340.5 million fatal overdoses, which, of course, is enough to kill everyone in the U.S. Obviously, there isn't a mechanism to perpetrate a terror attack where everyone is killed by fentanyl, but that gives a picture of the scale of the problem.
Yeah.
And Abbott noted that the subcomponents of fentanyl are produced primarily in China and India, but China being the key in that equation. So when it comes to fentanyl, it is being trafficked in the U.S. at an alarmingly increasing rate. It isn't just a normal spike in the use of a drug or the overdose of a drug. It has the feel of there being sinister intent behind it, homicidal intent, not just a public health crisis or some kind of public health scare. In addition, the drug is being shrouded as prescription drugs. People are purchasing prescription drugs off in the black market that they think are one drug, and it is laced with fentanyl. And there are even cartel members that are designing it to look like candy so that children will take this drug. Oh
my gosh.
So it is extremely dangerous, and that was the justification for our governor declaring that people who spread this drug are terrorists trying to kill people.
Yeah. So what are some of the measures the state police could take to combat fentanyl trafficking?
Well, they've already been seizing it, and one of the law enforcement officers there said in one stop they were able to seize, I think, 10,000 it was either 10,000 pills or 10,000 deadly overdoses. I'm not sure how many or which one of those, but it was 10,000 units of fentanyl that were deadly, and that was just in one stop. But Abbott wasn't all that specific, but he indicated that they would begin to seize assets and disrupt cartel networks, are the words that he used. The Sinaloa cartel and the New Generation cartel were specifically designated, but other cartels could be designated as well. And Abbott wrote a letter to the White House encouraging them to declare Mexican cartels that traffic fentanyl to be terrorist organizations, so that this is also a federal level designation and not just something that the governor is doing. And he stated that he would be working ahead of the 88th legislature, which is just 3 or 4 months away, on legislation that would upgrade the penalty for trafficking fentanyl to virtually a murder charge if the death of an individual occurred as a result of giving them fentanyl.
There you go. Hayden, thanks for covering that for us. Hudson, we're coming right to you. Sticking with the governor's news here, Greg Abbott made headlines for his busing program, and El Paso seems to have something similar. Is the city of El Paso doing the same thing?
Yes. El Paso has sent over 1,000 individuals who legally crossed into the United States to sanctuary cities throughout the U.S., and they will continue to do so as long as they need to. So even though Governor Greg Abbott has received a ton of media attention for his program to bus non-citizens to places like New York and Chicago, El Paso has not received the same notoriety whatsoever. El Paso is a Democratic-led city, and it really shows that the influx of people into this country is a serious apolitical issue that requires immediate solutions. Texas cities like El Paso, Eagle Pass, Del Rio, and San Antonio are struggling to keep up with the sheer numbers that we are seeing at the southern border. El Paso saw 8,400 citizen or non-citizens transit through the city to a final destination in August alone.
Wow. So you spoke on how the influx of illegal immigration is straining Texas cities. Is this why El Paso is pursuing the program? What's their reasoning?
Yes, this is exactly why. In mid-August, Customs and Border Patrol officials told the city that if they could not house the hundreds of daily non-citizens, they would be released onto the street. So El Paso responded by paying a charter bus company $400,000 to bus the unhoused people released by CBP to the sanctuary cities of their choice. So earlier in May of this year, they issued an emergency ordinance following the repeal of Title 42, the public health declaration. And so they issued this emergency ordinance in response to the crisis, and it allows the city to use public funds to transport people to protect the public infrastructure, health, safety, and welfare of the city.
There you go. So who is footing the bill for this program? And talk to us about whether other Texas cities are doing anything similar.
So according to the city, the federal government is going to pay for the busing program, but will only reimburse them. The city has to pay the bill at the onset. They also recently signed a contract with another charter bus company for $2 million to continue the program. And San Antonio is also flying and busing non-citizens to sanctuary cities. As of mid-August, San Antonio had spent over $300,000 on plane and bus tickets for people going to sanctuary cities. And this has surely risen dramatically in the last month as the numbers continue to pile up at the southern border.
There you go. Well, Hudson, thank you for that coverage. Bradley, we're coming to you. Let's talk about Austin. After the city council voted on an ordinance that granted the Office of Police Oversight more power, Mayor Adler faced staunch criticism from one of the city's most influential reimagined policing activists here in Austin. What did he have to say?
So Chris Harris, the policy director at the Austin Justice Coalition, said on Twitter, police violence apologists rejoiced today thanks to Mayor Adler. He limited testimony, reneged on letting 2 police violence victims speak, including Justin Howell, who was one of the individuals injured pretty substantially during the 2020 protests turned riots. He was injured by a stray beanbag round that was shot. Harris continued, and Adler lied about supporting the oversight he hustled to stall. He'll soon lack the power to atone for his deceit. Pretty stark words from someone who has been not only a supporter of Adler, but has had Adler among his own supporters. It is a pretty substantial break. Harris is among the least measured of this activist crowd. Like, he pops off on Twitter quite a bit. I spoke to one of his, actually the guy who heads up the Austin Justice Coalition. He had a different take. He said that Chaz Moore was more measured about it, but Chris Harris, he did not hold back against the mayor. And the result of this vote was that the petition that Harris was probably the chief circulator of will now go to the May ballot instead of being adopted outright by the council. And what it does is it grants more investigative authority to the Office of Police Oversight. The Office of Police Oversight, of course, has been maligned and also found to be violating its authority granted in the police labor contract that was released earlier this year, I think, or at the very end of last year. So this is something that these activists have wanted for a long time. They want someone from the city to really hold a lot of power over the police department.
Who is this guy in the first place? Who is Chris Harris?
Yeah, so if you've ever watched an Austin City Council meeting, which I don't know why you would, they drag on forever. But he is one of the most well-known faces of the reimagined policing movement in Austin. You recognize him instantly. He has a really large afro that is his signature. And whenever you see, sometimes it can be hard to see the people walking up with their face talking to the council, and he's pretty obvious because of that. But
we love a good head of hair.
Hey, I wish I could grow that. But he also sits on the city's Reimagining Public Safety Task Force, which is in charge of analyzing public safety in the city and making policy recommendations to officials. The director of the aforementioned Office of Police Oversight is also on that. There's a lot of working behind the scenes between these city officials who are tasked to do this stuff in the public and the activists that are driving a lot of the change in the city, whether it's the camping rescission that we saw in 2019 that has since been reversed, whether it's the massive police budget cut and redirection, whether it's the bail change that occurred in 2017. Harris has his hand in all this stuff, and he's incredibly influential. I saw on Twitter an email, someone did a FOIA request, and you know what? I'll just give him a shout out. He's an anonymous Twitter account, Johnny K 2001 or something. I don't know how this guy finds all these records he's able to obtain, especially email records within the city of Austin. But he found one from Adler to Harris in 2019, in which the mayor said, "Your involvement continues to be very constructive and helpful, and for that I remain very appreciative. I'll need your continuing help, leadership, and teaching." So that right there shows at least the reliance that Adler has on Harris, along with the other activists in that crowd.
So what does this mean for Mayor Adler?
For himself, at least his political future, probably not much. He's a lame duck. He cannot run for re-election. He gave his final State of the City speech last month. But it is interesting seeing an activist that has supported him for so long and so vigorously knife him in the back on the way out. It does indicate, I think, that Adler was not the only one steering the ship during his tenure. And, you know, if you've been paying attention, that is pretty obvious. Like I've said, these activists have a lot of influence in what goes on in City Hall. But it'll be interesting to see how this movement advances with whomever is elected mayor next.
There you go. Thank you, Bradley. Hayden, back to you. Which states called on the Biden administration to declare fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction?
I'm going to talk about drugs again, if that's okay with you. Attorney General,
you have my blessing.
Great, excellent. We're gonna forge ahead then. Attorney General Paxton joined a letter with many other attorneys general from across the country, including the Attorney General of Guam, and those states are Arkansas, Connecticut, Florida, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Hampshire, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, and West Virginia. And those attorneys general are bipartisan. There are Republicans and Democrats in that group. In fact, the leads on this letter were the Attorney General of Florida and the Attorney General of Connecticut. Attorney General of Florida, she's a Republican. Connecticut's Attorney General is a Democrat. So a bipartisan group of attorneys general calling on Biden to declare fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction. And as we talked about earlier, many of the justifications in this letter were the same as Abbott's justification for declaring them terrorist organizations. And the nature of fentanyl was referenced in this letter as being highly destructive and having the ability to be not just dangerous to health, but a weapon.
Yeah, absolutely. So what was some of the language in the letter to the White House?
Well, this quote was particularly strong. They said, "Indeed, given fentanyl's lethality, the amounts being interdicted and seized are inconsistent with what one would expect from drug trafficking activity and are indicative of either purposeful conspiracy to murder Americans or an effort to stockpile a dangerous chemical weapon," end quote. And that's frightening to think about a drug being used as a weapon of mass destruction. But that is the consensus among these 18 attorneys general. And U.S. Customs and Border Protection, as of the update that was released on Monday, stated that 12,900 pounds of fentanyl has been confiscated so far this fiscal year, and that's still not including September. So we have 1 month to go in FY 2022, and we almost have 13,000 pounds of fentanyl that have been seized. And that's just by CBP. That doesn't count what's been seized by state police and other local agencies. And to put that in perspective, 11,200 pounds were seized in all of 2021, which, as I talked about earlier, was already a record-setting year for the seizure of fentanyl, contributing to the opioid crisis. So this is one more tool, and they called it, quote, an unorthodox solution that may help abate or at least slow the crisis's trajectory. And that, I think, characterizes what this would be. When you think of a weapon of mass destruction, you don't necessarily think of a pill, especially one that I said has been designed to look like candy or even disguised to look like a legitimate prescription. But that is the course of action that this bipartisan group of attorneys general is taking. And Paxton himself is in the middle of a political battle. He is facing Democrat Rochelle Garza in the general election. That's his main opponent. Libertarian Mark Ashe is also on the ballot. But it would be politically advantageous for him to focus attention on a common enemy. No one's pro-fentanyl and no one is pro-weapon of mass destruction. So there could be political things at play here. But of course, the crisis is legitimate. His campaign, or his opponent in the election, doesn't mention fentanyl in her campaign website, but she does talk about being opposed to his, quote, wasteful border enforcement efforts, and she's referencing Operation Lone Star. So no one's out there saying that they're pro-fentanyl, but Democrats are opposed to some of the measures that have been taken, and there is, of course, the criticism that this is happening a couple of months before the election. So a lot going on politically in addition to the alarming increase in fentanyl seizures.
Hayden, thank you for breaking that down for us. And I think very interesting to watch a Democrat attorney general as one of the headliners, particularly in a state as far north as Connecticut. That's a very interesting kind of political, addition to this story. So thank you for that coverage. Bradley, there was a notable court ruling on a gun law this week. We definitely have some gun news we need to talk about. So tell us about it.
Yeah, so a federal judge in Texas ruled unconstitutional the federal government's prohibition against those under felony indictment from purchasing firearms. Now, that's a prohibition against people under indictment, not those convicted. If you're convicted of a felony, you are prohibited from purchasing, owning, carrying a firearm. So in the ruling, the court said the Second Amendment is not a second-class right. No longer can courts balance away a constitutional right. After Bruin, that's the landmark SCOTUS decision that occurred earlier this year. I'll get into that in a minute. The government must prove that laws regulating conduct covered by the Second Amendment's plain text align with this nation's historical tradition. The government does not meet that burden. So Bruin, it set forth this two-step analysis of gun laws that courts are now supposed to take into account when considering the constitutionality of some regulation. The two steps are: laws must adhere to the meaning and historical context of the Second Amendment, and two, whatever regulation is in question must not unnecessarily burden gun rights. So in order to get to that second step, it must meet the first. And in order for it to survive judicial scrutiny, it must meet both, per that rubric, essentially. This lawsuit specifically stems from a situation where an individual, Jose Gomez Quiroz, was indicted on multiple felony charges, but purchased a pistol during the proceedings, neither of which he'd been convicted on yet. He was then arrested, tried, and convicted for illegally purchasing a weapon and falsifying ATF paperwork.
Other than the implication for the specific law, why is this notable?
So taking what I just mentioned about the two-step analysis, we are seeing a lot of courts apply that to new lawsuits. One I'll get into later that I think we talked about last week, that pertains to this. We saw California's prohibition on purchasing AR-15s be held unconstitutional through this analysis. And so because of what the nation's highest court ruled in Bruin, we're seeing a lot more focus on the historical context and realities of the founding and the Second Amendment, what they meant when they said it. For example, in this ruling, or actually in the other one we'll talk about that we talked about last week, the court ruled or mentioned that when at the time of the founding, militias included 18 to 20-year-olds, and so therefore clearly the Second Amendment was not intended to preclude them from exercising it. So we're going to see a lot more of this, I think, especially in more conservative corners of the country where judges tend to be more conservative, and in courts that lean more conservative. This is also especially notable because it'll likely go to the Fifth Circuit next, which is on balance more conservative than liberal.
Very good. Well, spicy stuff. Thank you, Bradley. Hey, listeners, I'm going to pivot here very quickly. If you enjoy listening to our podcast each week, consider subscribing to The Texan. We're not funded by corporate interest or big donors, so we rely on the subscriptions of everyday Texans to keep churning out news. When you subscribe to The Texan, you'll get access to stories like all the ones we've been discussing on this podcast as soon as they're published, so that you can stay informed, up to speed, and ready to vote at the ballot box. A subscription is $9 monthly, but you can save by purchasing an annual subscription for $90, which comes out to just $7.50 per month. And right now, we're running a promotion. New subscribers will get a free long-sleeve t-shirt with this snazzy John Steinbeck quote. Texas is a state of mind. Texas is an obsession. Above all, Texas is a nation in every sense of the word. For more details, visit thetexan.news/subscribe or click the URL in the description of this podcast. Now let's jump back to chatting about the stories from this week. Hayden, we're coming to you. Talk to us about why Sheriff Javier Salazar is investigating the flights to Martha's Vineyard.
This is probably one of the more bizarre stories that I've written about in recent memory.
Would you call it spicy?
I would call it spicy. Yes.
What's the Mackenzie spice rating on this?
On this story? Out of 5. I say, like, if you go to a Thai restaurant, you rate something out of 5 stars in terms of how spicy you want it. I'd give this like a 3-star. Like certain bites, it's so spicy, you just, you really need water in that moment, but it's not going to scald you.
Wow, this analogy is getting really complex.
I'm here for you.
It's increasingly layered, like an onion.
Wow.
Now,
it's a Shrek reference. But
no, this is not an onion story. We have had onion stories on this podcast.
And that was very spicy.
But no, I think 3 out of 5 spice meter rating is pretty good for this one. But Sheriff Javier Salazar in Bexar County. San Antonio is the county seat of Bexar County, for those who don't know. And it's spelled funny, but that's beside the point, is investigating an action taken by the state of Florida, specifically Governor Ron DeSantis, using funds appropriated by the Florida legislature to transport non-citizens. And I say non-citizens because they are illegal immigrants who were taken into custody, given paperwork, and then dropped at what is called a migrant resource center. And I know Hudson's going to talk about that soon, so I won't get into that. But they were taken from San Antonio to Florida, reportedly, and then to Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts to be dropped off in a sanctuary jurisdiction, according to DeSantis. And Sheriff Salazar, in this news conference, accused unnamed suspects of, quote, preying upon these individuals by promising them a better life somewhere else. And this was probably, here's one of the quotes from him. Quote, "What infuriates me the most about this case is here we have 48 people that are already on hard times. They are here legally in our country at that point. They have every right to be where they are. And I believe that they were preyed upon. Someone came from out of state and preyed upon these people," end quote. He is saying that there's some kind of deception involved, and that, quote, under false pretenses, they were told that they would be given jobs or housing, but he is laying out what he thinks this investigation might show. He was not announcing the results of an investigation, and he said that it was political theater for these individuals to come in, presumably at the behest of Ron DeSantis, to take them from San Antonio to Martha's Vineyard. A little bit of an ironic criticism, given that he's launching an investigation. They haven't completed the investigation. So he was asked, by a reporter, is there some kind of political motivation because you're a Democratic sheriff investigating someone who is a Republican governor? And he swore up and down that there was no political motivation and that he would pursue the case the same, even if the suspects turned out to be in his own party. But those were the main criticisms that Salazar had against this action.
So what was Governor DeSantis' response to this investigation?
Well, he did respond in an interview with Hannity, and his communications director also responded. But he contended that these people were, quote, basically destitute, end quote. And he said going to Martha's Vineyard was in their best interest, unless, in fact, this jurisdiction does not have the resources that they say they do to take care of all these people. And they stated that they weren't prepared. And I think the governor of Massachusetts condemned him for doing this. But he said that they signed consent forms and that the vendor that transported these people up to the Northeast gave them packets with information about how to access services and how to get around the area. So more or less, DeSantis said that if they ended up somehow stranded or without the necessities that they needed, that the onus was really on the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And he criticized them for virtually deporting them as soon as they got there. They also mentioned, DeSantis and his communications director pointed out that Bexar County was the setting for the deaths of about 50 people, 53 to be exact, in the semi-trailer that was found in a human smuggling case near San Antonio. And the sheriff didn't make nearly as big of a deal of that. He did not have a press conference like he did in this instance, where people went voluntarily. So those were the main criticisms the main responses that DeSantis offered. DeSantis was not the first person to do this. Governor Abbott started ordering state officials to transport non-citizens out of Texas to Chicago, New York City, and Washington, D.C. But I think the reason DeSantis is getting a little bit more attention is he's widely considered to be a 2024 Republican presidential candidate. He's not announced that, but people are probably a little bit more interested in what DeSantis is doing because he could be angling for a run for the White House in a couple of years.
Certainly. And we've seen the DeSantis-Abbott comparisons over and over again politically, particularly in the COVID years when we were watching governors hand down different orders and stipulations, or, not handing down orders and stipulations. So they certainly have had a lot of comparisons. So interesting to watch this one in particular be something where the governor of Texas was the first to act on this specific issue. Bradley, let's talk about BlackRock. BlackRock CEO Larry Fink sat on a panel at the Clinton Global Initiative with the former president this week and made some very interesting comments. Give us a rundown.
So during his question and answer panel, Fink touted the transition away from fossil fuels. And this comes just weeks after his company was among those on Texas' initial list of fossil fuel divestors, priming them for state pension funds to be removed from either BlackRock Holdings or investment funds, along with 9 other financial companies. BlackRock has frequently denied this accusation. And it's just kind of, there's no agreement on this. But Fink has made things considerably more interesting because of his public comments. And this is one example of multiple public appearances that he's made that he has said things like this. And to the former president, he said, the tectonic shift toward decarbonization is happening. We are seeing big shifts because of heat and drought. We're seeing every day that climate risk is investment risk, and people are waking up to that. He further went on to say, because of rising prices, we're seeing the cost of the green premium, the higher cost of establishing renewable energy technologies and reliance. We're seeing that shrink quite considerably. And so the amount of investment dollars going into new decarbonization technologies accelerating very rapidly. I think it's important to note that we're not seeing the green premium decrease. It's just the cost for more traditional forms of energy is rising up to the green premium level. And also a substantial reason energy prices are so high is the very shift by governments that Fink is touting and giving credence to, away from fossil fuels and toward reliance on renewable energy. A couple examples of that are the bottleneck at refineries. We've seen the country unable to build any new refineries in like 50 years. That limits the amount of supply that can be produced when we see demand spike. We've also just seen a general restraint by oil and gas companies, worried about just the posture by, take our federal government, the policy there, and not putting more investment into further oil and gas development because they don't see a potential return on investment there.
What does this mean for Texas?
So for officials like Lieutenant Governor Patrick and Comptroller Hager, it confirms what they've been saying for so long, that BlackRock itself and other such companies, but BlackRock is the face of this, are talking out of both sides of their mouth, both saying publicly, yes, we're doing this decarbonization push, but then telling the comptroller, oh no, we're not divesting or sanctioning, which is an even bigger part of this, whether they're with their rhetoric moving capital away from where it would otherwise go towards oil and gas companies and other such, coal companies, things like that. So for them, it's just confirming what they have said for a while. And this will likely strengthen their resolve to do more next session, such as pass legislation prohibiting banks operating in Texas from denying loans and insurance policies to fossil fuel companies wholesale. Obviously, if it's like a bad investment, you'd still be able to deny the loan. But there are some banks and insurance companies that are flat out saying, we're not doing any fossil fuel financing, and that under a prospective bill that one legislature has identified would be not allowed. Something similar was done with gun manufacturers and Citibank. So this is going to continue to be an issue, and thanks to Fink and his comments, like it's not going away. And I'm sure Hager and Patrick will just get even more angry at it.
Republicans might pounce.
Yes.
They might
Word
pounce
on the street
this.
is
Yeah, just throwing that out there. Thank you, Bradley. Hudson, we're coming back to you. Senator John Cornyn and a group of other Republican senators sent a letter to U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland. What did they ask of him?
So the group of senators demanded that Garland grant special counsel protections and authorities to David C. Weiss, the U.S. attorney presiding over the Hunter Biden probe. In the letter, they first alleged that Garland has politicized the DOJ, which is something that he promised not to do when he was appointed by President Biden. And they claim that because of this level of politicization, Weiss must be granted special authority over the case in order to be free from Garland's influence in the larger DOJ and the political influences that are out there. So it is interesting to note that Weiss is a holdover from the Trump administration has been in charge of the probe since 2020. And the goal of Merrick Garland keeping him in that position was to have the image that there is no political interference.
Got it. So talk to us about what Hunter Biden is being accused of.
So Hunter Biden is being accused of involvement with a bribe meant to stop an investigation into a Ukrainian gas company called Burisma, their CEO. So at the time of the alleged bribe, he was a member of the Burisma board. Further, the joint corruption investigation into Burisma by the U.S. and UK governments directly coincided with Hunter Biden's time as a board member for the company, and so that's raising serious suspicion. He's also accused of unlicensed foreign lobbying, as he has been seriously connected to the lobbying firm Blue Star, and his hard drive, which was obtained by U.S. authorities, show emails with him setting up meetings between Burisma and U.S. officials while he was an official Secret Service protectee. Finally, he is also accused of tax fraud, which Weiss is also investigating.
So talk to us about the status of the investigation.
Yeah, so no charges have been filed yet. And the senators are sending this letter as reports show that the probe is at a critical juncture. So they are concerned that because Hunter Biden is the president's son, the DOJ and FBI will not prioritize this case and will ultimately never bring charges against him and will allow it to just float away into the ether. And so because the FBI has already attempted to limit exposure of stories relating to the Hunter Biden laptop, they think that without special protections for Weiss, the case will be dropped and no charges will be brought against Biden.
There you go. Well, Hudson, thanks for covering that for us. Bradley, more gun news. We have an update in the case about Texas's prohibition on 18 to 20-year-olds carrying handguns. What happened?
So DPS, Department of Public Safety, and its director, Stephen McCraw, decided to appeal the district court ruling that I mentioned earlier that held 18 to 20-year-olds must be allowed to carry handguns, saying that Texas' prohibition on that is invalid for various reasons, but among them is that it fails the Bruin test that I just talked about. This comes after Governor Abbott seemed to indicate that he had no interest in appealing the ruling. He was asked by a reporter about that, among other gun laws, shortly after this opinion dropped, and there was little indication that at least he wanted to. Now, it's not obviously not totally up to him. He has a lot of sway, but he is not running the Department of Public Safety. So it just appears that that DPS decided to go its own way on this.
There you go. So another aspect of this is that the AG is representing DPS, the Attorney General. Explain that.
So the Attorney General has represented McCraw and DPS in this lawsuit and continues to, at least as of the notice of the appeal filing. I'm sure once the case gets further along at the Fifth Circuit, there could be a change of counsel. But as of now, the Attorney General, his first assistant, and a couple other attorneys their names are on this filing. I think this is notable most because conservatives would probably prefer the ruling to stand. So how will they react to this? And another reason that this is top of mind is that Paxton received some criticism in a similar situation when his office represented and continues to represent the Secretary of State over the passage of a constitutional amendment It's a very obscure issue. It has to do with toll roads. No reason to get into the details, but this is a far more substantial and contemporary important topic, whether 18 to 20-year-olds can exercise their Second Amendment right, as the court says, to carry handguns. And so what's going to happen is Paxton going to receive some criticism for this as well, along the same lines as the other situation? Does he eventually decide to tell tell DPS to either use its own in-house lawyers to represent them or hire outside counsel? It is customary for the AG to represent state agencies. That is generally how things work. That is one of the main responsibilities of the AG, but it is not required. It's not mandated. There are multiple other options that are seldom taken, but have been taken before. And so, in addition to the legal implications of this, the political implications are pretty paramount. And I think there will be further developments on this, but we shall see where they go.
Thank you, Bradley. Hayden, tell us about the historic number of illegal immigrants apprehended so far this fiscal year.
I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because I don't want to drown everybody in Google spreadsheets like I was yesterday. But there were more than 2 million illegal immigrants apprehended and encountered along the southwest border from October of last year through August of this year. Again, we're talking about fiscal year 2022. And for the entire country, there were nearly 2.5 million encounters. There were 1.96 million total enforcement actions reported for FY 2021. So CBP was explicit that we're going to have more removals and expulsions this year than in any other year prior. And Title 42 is still in effect, which is the COVID-19 order. Almost all other COVID-19 restrictions have been ended, but that one is still in place due to a federal judge's order. And 71,000 of the encounters along the southwest border ended in a Title 42 expulsion last month. In Texas, there were about 117,000 encounters in our border patrol sectors, Big Bend, Del Rio, El Paso, Laredo, and the Rio Grande Valley. And then along the southwest border overall, there were 181,000 encounters.
Got it. So what countries were major sources of illegal immigration in August?
Commissioner Chris Magnus, who is the lead for CBP, said that illegal immigration from Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba was a large chunk of the enforcement encounters in August. And he also touted the Biden administration's efforts to decrease illegal immigration from Mexico and Central American countries. People are crossing multiple times. They get arrested multiple times. And part of that is because of Title 42. They're sent right back over. They're sent over the border, so they try to cross again. So the number of people is different than the number of enforcement encounters. I think I've been over that before. But there were 55,000 illegal immigrants from Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba arrested in the southwest border overall, and then 57,000 of them were from Mexico and northern Central America. So a pretty huge chunk of the number of individuals from those three countries, which are under failing communist regimes, is the phrase that Magnus used.
Got it. Hayden, thank you. Hudson, you wrote a great piece about something Hayden mentioned earlier, the Migrant Resource Center in San Antonio. What is the Migrant Resource Center?
The Migrant Resource Center is San Antonio's answer to the influx of non-citizens into the city. So before the center was open, there was no centralized area for the people brought from the border to wait for transit to their host city or another sanctuary city. People brought to the city by Customs and Border Patrol and ICE would wander around Travis Park near downtown because that's where the Greyhound bus station is, or they would crowd the San Antonio airport, and it would just cause a serious amount of issues in the fact that they were all being just brought to somewhere where there was no centralized location. So the city answered by using a vacant CPS Energy building on the north side of town to temporarily house the thousands of weekly non-citizens. So located in a once quiet residential neighborhood, people at the center are allowed to stay there for 3 days until they are sent out onto the street to be essentially homeless. Many of the people do not have travel plans. Many of the people have travel plans and are in predetermined host cities, but many do not, and walk up and down the street with no money, clothes, or food. So as someone who has lived in this area of San Antonio for a while, it seriously is a stark contrast to the way things used to be here. So the city notes that since last year, they have served over 200,000 people who they say are legally transiting to other places nationwide. Now around 600 new non-citizens come to the center every single day.
Wow. So you mentioned that the center changed the neighborhood. Explain that to us.
Yeah. So driving up and down the street and in the surrounding area, there's a legitimate crisis occurring. Thousands of people who were not previously in the city now sit in front of the restaurants and shops around the center. I talked to one man who runs an embroidery shop, and he said that the center has brought crime to his business. He told me that some people will shoplift and that those that do not will ask him for clothes, food, and other resources, things that he cannot provide them. According to him, cars have also been broken into, and he has had to invest heavily in security cameras to prevent loss. He says that all in all, he has to speak with 300 people per day from the center, and he says he's losing customers and he's wasting precious time.
How long will the center be open, and how much has it cost the city so far?
So according to a San Antonio official, the center will be open until the end of December. The center has cost the city over $1 million as of mid-August, and this cost is rapidly increasing. So the center is staffed with SAPD and SA Fire Department personnel, and they are paid overtime to work at the center as it is a departure from their regular duties. So you can see where the money is going to be adding up there. Additionally, the city foots the bill for migrant transport and gives them plane and bus tickets to the cities of their choice. They claim that they will be reimbursed by FEMA, but they have not yet received money from the federal government, and so that's currently coming out of the city's budget. So it's an interesting story, and I mean, even last Friday, I saw just a massive bus of people get dropped off in front of the center, and it's not stopping, and it will continue to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And folks, I would encourage you to go to the Texan.news and read this piece from Hudson. Great story. Bradley, Texas Republicans secured a big win in the Fifth Circuit when the court upheld the state's anti-social media censorship bill. What did the court say?
So the Fifth Circuit, I think it was 3 or 4 judges that sat on this panel. They ruled in urging such sweeping relief, the platforms, as in the tech platforms, offer a rather odd inversion of the First Amendment. That amendment, of course, protects every person's right to the freedom of speech, but the platforms argue that buried somewhere in the person's enumerated right to free speech lies a corporation's unenumerated right to muzzle speech. I included quite a few quotes in the article from the court's opinion. Each of them are pretty fiery, like that one. So you can check those out there. But overall, the theme was the same, that Texas's law that prohibits these companies from censoring individuals on their platforms based on viewpoint, that is kosher, that is allowed to stand, at least for now. We'll see what the higher court does with that. But the bill allows people who have been kicked off of platforms to sue these companies. And so I'm not aware of any lawsuits that have occurred from that. But this might spark that. We'll see. In contrary to what the court held, the tech company petitioners argued that the law chills speech. Basically a doctrine of legal jurisprudence, that First Amendment doctrine that says, laws that whether they intend or not to, that prevent people from expressing speech, chills it, that those are not allowed to stand. And they argue that this meets that that threshold. However, the court disagreed and said that if Section 7, the part of the bill that does this, chills anything, it chills censorship. And so the bill will likely be appealed to SCOTUS, and Justice Samuel Alito said when the petitioners or the tech companies tried to get the Supreme Court just to take it up, immediately filed a petition for mandamus. He said that he expects this to come up at some point anyway. So maybe this coming term, this will be something that we see on their docket.
There you go. Thank you, Bradley. Let's move on to Tweetery. Hayden, what did you see on Twitter this week?
Why are you already laughing? I haven't even started talking yet.
Because I forgot what it was, and I read it, and then I giggled.
That's because I didn't really find very interesting things on Twitter. So I was looking at the trending column, and end of the world was trending under entertainment. And
is the end of the world entertaining? I guess
it
that's
is funny or fun to some people. But there was one tweet under an account called the Nap Ministry. I have no idea what this is, but it has a lot of followers. And it said, weekly reminder that quitting is an option. Failure is not the end of the world and actually valuable. Perfectionism is never possible. It's a myth.
Wow.
I don't quite know what this tweet is getting at, but I guess if you're working hard on something, just stop. Just go to sleep.
Just quit.
Just quit. It's not worth it.
That's what I do when I'm losing in Madden.
That's what
Yeah.
That's pretty valid. I was in a coffee shop the other day with my fiance, and we overheard this conversation some guy was having with a friend, and he was like, yeah, I just can't wait for the earth to have no more people on it. And I just think we're burdening the earth so much. And I'm excited for the day that there are no humans on this earth.
You heard someone say this?
I heard someone say it. And I was like, oh my gosh. So do we want everyone just to die? What's our solution? I know exactly. Yeah. And he's talking to someone that I'm sure he has a relationship with and doesn't have negative feelings toward. What does he want them to do?
He watched Marvel way too much and sympathized with Thanos and his whole shtick.
Thanos was only 50% though.
Yeah.
He wasn't 100% guy.
He's only 50% guy. 50% reset. Boy. Okay. Well, that got dark. Let's move on. Hudson, what did you see? Actually, this is still dark. Or maybe not.
No, I mean, it's a little dark depending on what happens, but I have been following the protests in Iran over the murder of a woman who is protesting the having to use hijabs because of the Islamic State in Iran, the theocratic government. And so after this, there have been massive protests, and they are now shutting down the internet in Iran so that they can't show a lot of this stuff on Twitter and all of the other social media platforms, but it's still making the rounds. And I mean, out of a lot of the times that I've seen this is definitely the largest. Women are burning their hijabs in public squares and shouting death to Khamenei. So we'll see what happens. And, hopefully we can see some democratic development in Iran for people that have been under the thumb of this theocratic radical regime for 50 plus years now.
Yeah, absolutely. Bradley, what did you see?
So I saw Dave Wasserman, the head of the Cook Political report. I think they're at the University of Virginia. They analyze the ratings of congressional seats, and there were three of these seats three Texas seats on this list. I think all of them are in South Texas. Yes, I believe so. They put out their updated seat rating, and it shows Texas 28, which is Henry Cuellar's seat. Then Texas 34, which is, I think, an open seat. That's involved in the weird switch with Vicente Gonzalez representing one and running the other one. I get them confused. I can't keep them straight. And And then, so those two are lean Democratic. Texas 28 moved from Democratic toss-up to lean Dem in this rating from the last rating. And then on the other side, you've got Texas 15, which is lean Republican. And so it tracks that the three most or closest battleground congressional seats in the state are all in South Texas, which is the center of this demographic shift from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. And these seats are very much up for grabs, along with much of South Texas. And Republicans are pouring a lot of resources into that. Democrats are hoping to maintain their long-held control of the area, but Republicans seem pretty optimistic that they can do something down there. And we saw, is 34 where Myra Flores won? Is that the special election?
I believe so.
So we saw a Republican win there. Now it's a special election. She's on the ballot again.
Yes, 34.
Yeah. But so the Cook political ratings, which are pretty good prognostication of which way these things go or will go. It has a focus on South Texas.
Yeah. Thank you, Bradley. I saw a tweet from Ad Impact Politics that I believe is tracking specifically the television ad spend of the Texas gubernatorial candidates for the general election. Very interesting. So total spend for Democrats who would in this case be supporting Beto O'Rourke is $27 million. That includes 16.9 from O'Rourke himself and 10.4 from the Could Have Been Worse PAC that has been backing O'Rourke for a while now. And then on the Republican side, we've got Abbott. That's the only big spender we have in this section, and that's 19 million. So 27 million total for Beto's side and 19 million from Abbott's side. Interesting in that future reservations for ad space for end of September to November, 16 million for Democrats and 6 million for Republicans.
I have a feeling that Republican Abbott number is going to jump up quite a bit.
100%.
He's got quite a bit of money in the bank.
Yeah. He's banking. He's bankrolling. He's a prolific fundraiser. Not that Beto is not, because he certainly is as well. It's going to be a huge spending race. And we know from the get-go, Dave Carney, the top strategist for Abbott, was saying that the governor was going to spend upwards of $100 million on this race. Yeah. Certainly looks to be that.
I don't know if that includes what he spent in the primary. I don't know if Carney's including that, because he spent a lot there too.
Because that comment was, I don't think it was.
It was right after the primary.
So, I think he was talking about the general.
He was talking about the general, but he didn't really specify
if it included the primary.
So,
that will be a piece down the road that you will write.
Regardless, it is a lot of money that he's going to spend.
Yeah. So much money. Okay. Well, gentlemen, let's talk about some what's going on in the office lately. We are kind of in this weird no man's land between the primaries, the runoffs, and the general's coming up quick now. Today's the first day of fall, so there is, this is fast approaching. But there's kind of a lull here in terms of reporting as we wait for the general election and as we wait for January to come around, because the legislative session will be absolutely crazy for us in so many ways. So I just kind of wanted to chat through this, get y'all's feelings on how things are going. I mean, if it's, I try and find, Friday, if we're done early, I'm just like, go home, because we're not going to be able to do that in a few months. Right. So we might as well do it now. And I feel like that's just kind of the vibe. We're more relaxed around here. I'm wearing a baseball cap today. That's how relaxed I am, I
was about to say you're literally leaning back in your chair, just
It's Thundercloud Thursday.
Oh my gosh!
So I'm really excited about my sandwich that I'm about to get.
That sounds really good.
That's what I'm thinking about right now.
I have some salmon and rice that I made, but that sounds really good. Man, maybe I'm gonna.
Did you go make that last night after your food? The one that you had meal prepped was not pleasant.
Not very good. I just think like leftover pork chops are just not super great in my opinion. Delicious fresh, but not super great afterwards. No, I already had that made. I made pork chops and salmon this week. I've got too much food made this week. It's a long story, but I was off Monday. But yeah, Hayden, how are you doing as we wait for the general election?
It does feel like the calm before the storm.
Yeah.
But I was saying earlier that the Texas legislature convenes 3 months, 19 days from now.
Whew.
And that saying that out loud makes it feel closer than just saying it's next spring.
Yeah.
But I was thinking earlier, this will be the first normal, in quotes, legislative session that we cover, that our outlet has covered, because we were, or the first beginning of the legislative session, because we were founded in late spring 2019. And then the next session after that was the COVID one.
Yes.
And then now we have this one.
Yeah.
So it will be the first time that the Texan has covered a session that was business as usual, so to speak, as close to that as you get these days, since our founding.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited for it. What does Hudson need to know going into a session, Brad?
It's a free-for-all.
Awesome.
Every man for himself.
Wow.
You better go in ready to pull hair. And
Gird your loins.
Prepare for the worst. And Hudson will be in the Senate, so he'll have...
Oh, yeah, you get the boring job.
Oh, okay.
That's not true. It's not boring. The House is insane. The Senate can be boring, but it's also in some ways easier to cover. Brad, don't get sassy at me. You literally are like, Hudson, you will hate your beat.
That's not what I said.
You will
I said
hate
it's
it.
the boring
It will
job.
bore you so much. It's not boring.
They're too diplomatic and polite
They
in
are.
the Senate. In the House, they're just like,
So many moving parts.
But here's the
Like,
thing. If
it's like
you
the
could,
House of Commons.
in the House, they just jump over the table and wrestle with each other.
Awesome.
yeah,
Not quite, but almost.
almost. It's
That'd be
almost
cool if
happened
they
a couple
did.
times.
Yeah,
Fights have broken
has.
out
Like
on the
combat.
House floor.
If y'all haven't seen it, y'all should go watch the video. I'm sure y'all have seen the video, but you may not have seen the
Yeah, I
video
haven't seen it.
of the parliamentarian leaving his desk and separating what was about to be a real fist fight, I think, during the 86th legislature.
No way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
What was this over?
Rinaldi and Navarez, I think. Is that the one you're talking about?
I think so.
That would
Yeah.
have been the 85th.
That would have been, that was
85th.
85th. That was the one I worked back in the day. Seems so long ago. It was
I bet
something
that
else.
caused. I bet people talked about that for a while
The
around the
building
Capitol.
was electric that day. It was sanctuary cities that were signed. I believe, it was sanctuary city. It was a sanctuary city bill that was signed into law a few months after session concluded, and a bunch of folks came into the gallery of the House wearing shirts that says "I'm illegal and I'm here to stay," and there were chants going on. It was crazy, and you're not supposed to wear any shirts or garb that is political in nature in the gallery because it's considered lobbying.
Yeah.
Very interesting House rules, and so. Regardless, there were a lot of folks who were escorted out of the gallery. It got very heated on the House floor because some reps were encouraging some of the chants happening up above. And then I believe Matt Rinaldi, at the time state rep, now current Texas GOP chairman, called ICE on some of the folks in the
No
gallery.
way.
100%. It got very contentious, and needless to say, there was a scuffle on the House floor between Representative Pancho Navarez and Rinaldi. So there were some very big threats uttered. So delightful stuff. Delightful stuff. Even like firearms that were talked about. Yeah, it was quite something.
Well, I missed that part.
It was a lot. It was
I wish I'd
absolutely a
moved to
lot.
Austin sooner.
Then you could have watched this insanity.
I
This
could
was
have been
before
part
the
of
Texan
that.
was launched, so we didn't have anything to do with it. Are you guys into fall at all? Do you guys care at all that it's the first day of fall? I totally do, but I've already been drinking pumpkin drinks.
Vibes. I like fall vibes a lot, but not really when it's 100 degrees outside.
Yeah.
And so it definitely needs to cool off a little bit before I get into that fall mode.
Yeah, I get that. I'm going for it regardless. I'm hoodieing it up today.
Yeah.
I'm pretending like I'm in Colorado.
I'm with Hudson. I think fall is a temperature. I don't think it's a date.
Oh, that's
Facts.
If it doesn't feel like fall outside, then
yeah.
it's not fall.
Yeah. That's totally fair.
I just hope by Halloween, it's like I can kind of wear like pants and feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, have a little bit of crispness. I know Brad's answer, but Brad, do you want to quickly talk about how much you just hate fall and pumpkin
I never
and
said I
everything
hated fall. I love
that is
Thanksgiving.
fun in this world?
So you like one day out of fall. What about all the other
No, it
days?
is actually cooler. Yeah, I like it. I just have an aversion to anything pumpkin.
Yeah.
Why?
It is the most overrated flavor.
He also doesn't like sweet potatoes.
Sweet potatoes. So.
I'm making pumpkin cheesecake cookies with my girlfriend this weekend.
Oh,
for
that
fall,
sounds so good.
Because I'm like that.
You're that guy.
Yeah.
That's a good guy to be.
Yeah.
Oh, man, it makes me hungry
You know
for a
what
cookie.
the first day of fall means to me, Mackenzie?
Oh, yeah. I'm nervous.
It means the summer of power grid collapse is over.
I'm happy for you.
Yeah. I'm sitting here looking at the ERCOT app, and guess
In your
what?
free time, as he does.
Yeah. I'll be sitting there watching TV, watching a football game, and I was like, oh,
Check the
pop
grid.
in my mind, check the grid. And guess what? The grid hasn't collapsed
The grid's
this
fine.
summer.
Look at that.
I will have a
Despite
piece.
crazy temperatures.
Yes, I will have a piece at some point on that. But it is, yeah, there are some people that are very upset about that.
So Brad hates fall and all things good is what I heard from that. Hayden, you enjoy fall. You're on the good side of the island.
I like fall because of football.
Football.
Every week, I can sit on the couch from 11 a.m. On Saturday to 10 p.m. on Sunday and watch football and not do
amazing.
anything else.
And make pumpkin cookies. Pumpkin
Make pumpkin
cheesecakes.
cookies.
Yeah.
It is amazing. One thing I found moving here was the 12 p.m. kickoff
Yeah.
in Eastern time, but that 1 hour difference is just so much better.
Yeah. No, like, because you like wake up on a weekend and then you're like, football's
You
on.
maybe eat breakfast, do one thing,
Yeah.
like go for a walk or something, and then football's on. You don't have to wait until midday.
You know, this morning, Hudson looked me dead in the eye and he asked me a sports related question. And I don't even remember it because it just translated as gibberish in my brain because I don't follow this at all. And so when y'all start talking sports, I just zone out. And I
Sorry to hear that.
I need to familiarize myself. Are you recording?
No, I'm not. I'm going to go check my fantasy team, actually.
Oh, okay.
Oh my God.
No, I just have it up in an awkward position. It looks like I'm recording you. I promise you. I'm
I thought
doing
you were
nothing
taking
of
a
the
picture.
sort.
I thought, do I have something on my
Did you
nose?
say you actually have a fantasy team?
Also, look at I'd whipped my,
Oh, is this a family
friend.
thing?
Yeah, it's a family thing. I whipped
Remember
my
when
sister.
we had a fantasy league?
I almost doubled her score just for the record.
And like nobody in the office except
who's
me
your highest
set their
scorer?
lineups.
Let me look. Let me look at what my team is. Yeah, that was bad.
That was very annoying.
I'm sorry about it. Oh, Lamar Jackson.
Yeah. He'll do that for you.
Yeah, he's been pretty good. Okay, gentlemen. Well, this has been delightful. And to be fair, I don't pay too much attention to my fantasy team. I just swap out players if they're on the bench or something
Well,
like
that's
that.
more than what many people do. So
Well, my
kudos to you.
soon-to-be brother-in-law texts me and reminds me. And so that's the only reason why I do. Well, folks, thank you so much for listening. Happy first day of fall or second day of fall as you're listening to this podcast. We appreciate you listening in, and we will talk with you next week. Thank you to everyone for listening. If you enjoy our show, rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want more of our stories, subscribe to The Texan at thetexan.news. Follow us on social media for the latest in Texas politics, and send any questions for our team to our mailbag by DMing us on Twitter or shooting an email to editor@thetexan.news. We are funded entirely by readers and listeners like you, so thank you again for your support. Tune in next week for another episode of our weekly Roundup. God bless you, and God bless Texas.